NS Design was founded in 1990, and one of the missions there was to make a full orchestral suite of instruments: violin, viola, cello, and bass. You see here there's actually two what we would call string basses. There's an omni bass, which is it's an upright bass but on a P bass scale, and then they've also got their regular upright bass. But that's a lot of Matt Bell talking, and we could be listening to Ned Steinberger. So let's talk to Ned. How's it going, Ned?
First, let me say hello, everyone, and what a pleasure it is to be here, and an honor, and to get to chat with you, Matt. So I'm all yours.
Yeah, Matt. So what was the thing that made you want to start making an orchestral suite of instruments after you had such a huge splash in the rock and roll world with guitars and basses?
Well, the way I got into bowed instruments was that I started to get feedback from some different violin players who I met, who were gigging with people using our basses and guitars. And the message was, that headless idea there, that would be awfully nice for a violin. They get awfully heavy, and be nice to create a more balanced instrument. And of course, that was just an invitation I couldn't really refuse or whatever. It was just much too fascinating for me, to think about. Again, my work is all about trying to create instruments that serve musicians, that are tools for musicians, that they can, that makes it easier for them to realize their vision of their music, and also instruments that can expand their horizons at the same time, because they offer possibilities that were not available before. So the idea of incorporating this headless concept into a violin was intriguing to me. And I made some violins back in the day. I was making guitars and basses primarily, Steinberger Sound Company. But then, just as I was getting into the violins, I did sell the business to Gibson, which I was interested in doing because I really never wanted to be a businessman on the level this business was developing beyond my. I'm interested in design, and making the instruments. I'm not interested, especially in becoming a business, a strongman or whatever you want to call it. Focused on business, and it's a lot of conflict there for someone like me, because you create an idea, you want to realize the idea. These are designs that are meant to be produced at least in limited production, so then you go into business to do that, and the next thing you know, there's no more room left to do the design work that what brought me into it initially. So anyway, I did make some carbon fiber violins. That's a whole other story. Extremely minimal. You're familiar with that, right, Matt? And that was a lot of fun. We might have made maybe 20 instruments altogether, and then the powers that be, the new owners of the company, felt it was important for us to concentrate more exclusively on fretted instruments, guitars and basses, and so that kind of went by the wayside. But then when I went back into my own independent design practice, I was fascinated by all these bowed instruments. It was a great opportunity to explore new territory, learn new things, and develop unique new designs. So it was perfect for me, just exactly what suited my interests. And so I dug in, I sort of jumped into the deep end of the pool, and here we are at this point, some 20 years later now. It actually 1990. I don't even want to count all the years. It's 30 years. So anyway, that the violin, the Bode Electric took a while. It was more in the mid 90s when that really started to get very serious, and here we are today.
Yeah. So it's been very successful, I think, with I think not too many manufacturers are really addressing all four of the orchestral suite: the violin, the viola, the cello, the bass. And it's cool that, you know, when you've got a group that wants to have a full suite, they all match, and you know the sounds all blend very nicely together, and the instruments look right together on stage. And it's, you know, I think Beyonce used NS Design for her famous Coachella set just a couple years ago, right?
Correct.
So one of the things that I've always found interesting talking to you about these instruments is as a designer, you were coming at this from a different direction than most people. A lot of people in the electric world are trying to
Outer space.
they're trying to mimic an acoustic violin, and your thought process is very different on that, right? You said, let's strip this thing down and see what is the minimum necessary requirement for a violin.
Well, the minimum necessary requirement is one way to put it, and is certainly part of it. But certainly the way I work is to try to understand the basics of how something works, and my design work is very functionally oriented. A lot of people would come to designing an instrument and be really all about, you know, the way it looks, and they just accept the existing technology and use it, and that's just not where they're focused. But I'm always focused on how to make an instrument perform on a higher level. And certainly in terms of violin, again, a lot of what brought me into this whole thing was that the headless concept is so suitable for a violin. Because it creates a different balance. It brings the weight back over the shoulder, and that cantilevered weight that's out at the end of the neck, that's what you feel. That's what you know, creates the problem with the, you know, chin bruises and you know, shoulders going out of joint and so on. So here was an opportunity to do something better, you know. And of course, better is in a world of musical instruments, there is no absolute better. It's what you like, right? And so that's a lesson I had to learn. Actually, it took me a while. I always kept trying to make something better, but I realize now it's more about creating opportunities to do things that are meaningful alternatives to what has been done, that hopefully have value for musicians. And if they don't, they die, they go right into the dustbin. But if they do have value for musicians, then they can have a life. So I want to explore those possibilities. And with an electric instrument, there are so many possibilities that you cannot do with an acoustic instrument. And that's very important, because there are a lot of things you can't do with an electric instrument that you can do with an acoustic instrument. So if you spend your time trying to replicate an acoustic instrument in an electric instrument, first of all, you will fail. And I've had plenty of failure. I know what that's like, but it's not what I look to do. I look to succeed. So that's just, for me, it's a formula for failure, because if you are imitating something and you're not exactly the same, then you're going to be inferior by definition. So rather, let's create let's open it up and let's look at what we can benefit from with an electric instrument. Improving the weight and balance, for example, is one thing we could do with a headless design. You can't make a headless acoustic violin, really. I mean, you could. I've played around with all that kind of stuff quite a bit, and I came away realizing that there's a lot of good reasons why they put the tuners on the end of the neck for an acoustic instrument that remain true today. But hey, this is not an acoustic instrument. The weight, if it's a solid body instrument, then the weight on the body is not it does not, if anything, it enhances the tone, rather than with an acoustic instrument, it really would degrade it. So here is a new tool, a new set of challenges and requirements, and let's imagine what we could do. I mean, that's the idea anyway. And so that's where the headless violin comes in. And of course, it's kind of interesting for me to look at my own way of operating, because I would say to myself, well, it's a logical way to make a bass guitar, let's say, to get it to balance really well. You make it headless, you put the weight of the tuners on the body, it balances perfectly, and wow, what a great, why does everybody stuck in doing it the old way when in a lot of ways it doesn't make that much sense? It makes, to my mind, makes more sense to go headless. But when I started making upright double basses, okay, someone had this idea, I wanted to make it headless. And then at a certain point, I said to myself, hey, I'm doing exactly what I see other people doing and I'm critical of. I'm doing it the way I'm used to doing it, even though maybe it doesn't really make sense. And putting the tuning machines up on at the end of a double bass has no balance issues with the tuners wherever they are. It's a more convenient location at the end of the neck. The technology exists, so I don't have to go out and reinvent the tuner in order to do it. And so that's why I do instruments. Some are headless, some aren't. Depends on what the instrument is and what the benefit of going headless would be. And so that's why we have the violin and viola, of course, are scroll-less, I should say. And the cello and bass are not. And of course, you talked about having a suite of instruments that have a common link, that are a family. But one of the challenges I faced was here I was creating a family. Some of the families had heads and some of them didn't. And how could they all be in the same family? So that was a big challenge.
Well, I think that obviously the pickup technology is one of those things that helps them to fit together in a family, and they do. There is very much the aesthetic of the instruments look like they were designed and built by the same person.
Well, that's intentional, to try, even with that limitation of having an essentially different construction. Every effort was made to have a consistent aesthetic as much as possible. Yeah.
I want to talk about the three different levels. We've got them hanging on the wall here. There's the wave violin, and then the NXT and the CR. And I'm going to talk about, a lot of people will ask, so what are the differences between those two? And I sort of know how I feel as a player. I'd love to hear your thoughts as a designer. What are the differences between those levels of the instrument?
Well, the most obvious difference are the electronics, in that the Wave series is 100% passive, which is really, it's incredible how great a sound you can get from a passive instrument. It does have the limitation that you need to have an amplifier with the impedance on the amplifier has to be high impedance compatible, 5K or more. And but when you have that right compatibility, you get a great sound out of the passive system, and it's bulletproof. It's very, very simple, straightforward, and the pickup itself is the key thing, really, on all these instruments. Is the pickup, aside from all the structure of the instrument, which is very important. But in terms of the sound, especially on a violin or any bowed instrument, pickup is hugely important, because with a bow, you drive the string completely differently than plucked, and magnetic pickups are really not suited for a bowed instrument. If you're bowing, we have magnetic pickups on the basses, but of course the basses are played pizzicato a great deal of the time, so the pickup is very similar on all the instruments, but the electronics vary, and of course the tuning systems and so on are similar as well, so if you want, we could go into the NXTA or wherever you want to head from here.
Yeah, okay. The NXTA. So it used to be the NXT, and then you guys had the idea to put a preamp in that, but rather than power it with a battery, you got a better idea.
First of all, it wasn't my idea. I just want to be clear on that. This is technology developed by the MySci company. A great guy by the name of Mikhail Ioffa is the inventor, and it's quite a spectacular system. This instrument can be played active and passive, which gives you a lot of versatility. But in the passive mode, It uses a supercapacitor. It does not have a battery. You never have to replace the battery. It's got like 500,000 recharges or whatever, so it's virtually lasts forever. And this supercapacitor charges in 60 seconds. Okay, so you have a little wall wart. It's just the coolest thing. And again, it's not my invention, but I just when it's spectacular. So you plug this thing into the wall using your output jack. It goes into, you get a 9-volt power source from the wall wart, pumps up the supercapacitor in a minute, and you're ready to play for 16 or more hours. So you can charge it before the gig and have great security. You never have to buy a battery. You don't have to throw the battery away and, pollute the earth, et cetera, et cetera. It's really an advancement in technology that we are very proud to be engaged with.
Yeah, I think one of the things that scares people about an active instrument. I think one of the things that sometimes scares people about an active instrument is what happens if I'm on stage and my battery dies. And in your case with this one, I mean, it only takes 60 seconds to recharge it if you need to. You could have a roadie run back there and do it real quick.
Just charge it before the gig. You're never gonna go there because all you got to do is, take a minute out to charge it. You get a setup there. You charge it. That's part of it. So you don't have to wonder. Once you've done that, I mean, if you forget to do that, you could have an issue, but that's another way that it's great because it's passive anyhow. So if you had a problem and you forgot to charge it, in the meanwhile, you can play passively. And then if you get 1 minute spare time, you got it charged again, you can go active. So it's pretty hard it's very fail-safe, bulletproof.
Yeah, that's what I love about it is in the worst case scenario, if you completely just brain farted and forgot to charge the thing and it dies on you on stage, you push one button and you're passive. You don't have the full tone that you would if you were active, but at least you're not dead in the water.
And you got a good tone too, by the way. If your amp isn't set up for it or whatever, that's one thing. But still, the passive. A lot of people actually prefer the passive tone. I mean, it's a matter of taste.
Yeah, most of the stuff that we have here in the shop is designed to handle those high impedances. So people will ask, well, play it in passive and then play it in active. And honestly, there's not a huge difference if you're playing through a Fishman Loudbox amp or something that's designed for that high impedance. They're like, well, I don't really hear a big difference between the tone. You're like, well, you wouldn't. It sort of depends. If you're plugging into a guitar amplifier that's not designed for that high impedance, then you're going to hear a difference. We just don't have any of that stuff here in the shop.
And you can plug it right into the board, line level. It's ready to go. So it just makes it extremely versatile.
Yeah, I thought that violin was a fantastic advancement. I do want to talk about the CR, and then I want to get to this polar pickup thing. So yeah, what's sort of the biggest difference between the NXT and the CR then?
Well, the CR is a 9-volt battery in it. And it's fully active, exclusively active, has active treble and bass. The passive, the NXT has a passive tone control where these are active tone controls. There's another thing on the CR, and that is that switch you're looking at there. The NXT has a switch also, but it is a two-way switch. The switch on the CR is pretty interesting because and we'll get into it with the polar pickup a little more, and really what the difference between Arco mode and Pitts mode is. But in this case, you have Pitts mode, Arco mode, and then you have a second Arco, mode for bowing, which is designed to give you more of an acoustic violin sound. In that, an acoustic violin, people often don't realize this, but like the G string on your acoustic violin the acoustic instrument isn't actually able to project the fundamental frequency of that G string in any meaningful way. So it's the first harmonic that you play, because you don't get to hear the fundamental. So if now you have a system with a pickup that is full range and an amp that's full range, all of a sudden you got all this low end, which could be a lot of fun for somebody experimenting with new sounds. But if you're trying to come across, and sound like an acoustic violin, you're better off having, cutting the bass frequencies pretty dramatically at the right frequency, and then all of a sudden it has a more acoustic quality to it. It also addresses, one of the things that happens with an electric instrument, which has so much wider range of frequency response. When you're playing that high E string, especially, and you change bow direction, all you violinists are familiar with the sort of sound that comes when you switch direction. All that is sub-frequency. So if you want to get rid of that, or make that more in line with what you hear on an acoustic instrument, you want to get rid of that low end that an acoustic instrument is incapable of generating.
Right.
So those are the three switch positions. So, and the CR, of course, is made to our highest standard. Some of the way I think of it is every instrument we make is a professional quality instrument. That's a bottom line. But the Wave is the most economical way that we know of to make a professional quality instrument that a professional player can go, well, that was fun. That's working. That sounds great. Whereas the CR is, okay, what is the most fantastic thing we can possibly do with less focus on what it costs, but on what we could do. And so it's kind of a philosophy behind the instruments. And so there's a place for both those, certainly people who are putting their whole heart and soul into playing and want the very best that's possible. And of course that tends to, there's a cost associated with that. Personally, I love getting instruments to people at a affordable price, so more people have access to it, more people get to have fun. The things that are expensive are less not everybody can afford them. The NXTa is kind of in between there in terms of providing more features and so on, and still keeping it as affordable as possible.
Yeah, I love that. And we've got a bunch of questions here, and I want to get to those. But first, so you guys are asking your questions. I'm not ignoring you. I will get to those. But I do want to give you a chance, Ned, to talk about the polar pickup, where you've got the switch between pits and arco. That's one of the most common questions we get on NS Design Instruments.
Okay, and it is one of the most unique things about NS Design Instruments. It's that feature really stemmed from the work I was doing on basses in particular. And all bowed instruments have features in common, or aspects in common that are very different from plucked instruments. So as I was developing the pickup for the bass, I could get this great bowed sound, all right? A really so responsive to the bow and just big and beautiful, and it's just, everybody loved it. But when you played it pizzicato, it has a huge attack and a kind of a quick decay. And the reason for that, and this may get more, I don't want to be overly technical here, but I would like to try to explain this. Okay. So when you bow an instrument, you drive the strings laterally. They vibrate up and down very little. They vibrate laterally. And if you look at an acoustic instrument, it's constructed with a bass bar and a sound post. And that whole geometry is all about converting the rocking motion of the bridge, which is what the strings are trying to, they're throwing the bridge back and forth. They're not making it go up and down, which would be the easy thing. Like, if it goes up and down, the top goes up and down, you get your sound. But if it's going side to side. One side goes down, the other comes. In terms of driving the top, it's a challenge. So that's how that whole technology was developed by the old masters. God bless them. And we have such a wonderful tradition with violins, especially, and all acoustic string instruments. Even though I like to try to imagine where we could go from here with electrics. I mean, the tradition is so beautiful and such a great place to jump off from. And it's amazing what these guys did too. Back in the day, they couldn't just go to Amazon and order another, drill bit or potentiometer or whatever. I mean, they had to go to the local blacksmith and they had to pound it out for them. So the technology that we have right now in terms of making things and so on is so fantastic. But these guys were great anyway, clearly, and they worked that out. But for an electric instrument, a little bit different. But we want to get that rocking motion. So in the arco mode, bow mode, the bridge, the pickup is very sensitive to the rocking motion of the bridge. And that's what gives you that really dynamic bowed sound. And so getting back to the bass, and now I'm playing at pits. Of course, as most of you probably know, I'm not a musician, but I ultimately depend on musicians to critique all of this stuff. But still, I can get a sense of what's going on from a technical standpoint. And what's going on there is that when you get the bridge set up to be super sensitive to the rock and not so much sensitive up and down, what happens is when you pluck the string, you pluck it laterally, right? You don't, you could slap a string on a bass guitar. That's perfectly okay. It's fine to do that. I think it's great, but it's not what people are doing 95% of the time. Okay, they're plucking side to side. So if your bridge is very sensitive side to side, that first transient, when you pluck that string, it just bam. It's like a drum. Okay, it's got that huge percussion. That big sound up front, and then it dies quickly from there. So you get, again, a drum-like sound, which is certainly fine for certain things. And by the way, my own understanding of it is that one of the reasons that the double bass, the upright bass, became popular for jazz and other music, other than classical music, and when it's played pits, that percussive quality is very important because the bass is just not that loud. So you need the boom in the beginning to be heard at all. So this was, this is what musicians were looking for, something that could be heard, that had a lot of attack. But with an electric instrument, of course, you got plenty of volume. Volume is not an issue. Maybe you want to be able to play a little more legato. Maybe you want to have a melodic line or whatever, and you don't want all that attack. That's what the pits mode is all about, because what we do is we reverse the sensitivity. So now the bridge is sensitive up and down, but insensitive side to side. So when you pluck the string, you have that big side to side transient, and the pickup goes, well, I get it, I hear it. It's makes sound right away and all. But it doesn't have that huge attack. It sort of suppresses the attack and gives you an instrument that's more like a conventional plucked instrument. And by the way, we talked about, electric instruments versus acoustic instruments. The very idea that you could have an instrument that has a different response depending on how you flip a switch or something else that's unique to electric.
Absolutely.
An acoustic instrument will sound, when you play it, Matt, it's going to sound one way, acoustic violin. When somebody else plays an acoustic violin, it's going to sound different. But for a given input, the output is always the same. You don't, if you two played identically, it would sound identical. In other words, it has one way of responding. But an electric instrument, you can make it respond in different ways. That's why having this capacity to directionality in the pickup is so exciting to me, because it's a new dimension of possibilities for people. And one other, just to finish up on that, if you think about plucked instruments. I mean, violins have an arch top and all, the sound post and all that. What is a flat top guitar? Is just a piece of flexible membrane on top of the guitar, and it doesn't do anything side to side. It does everything up and down. So again, if you have an electronic system that's sensitive side to side, it won't sound anything like that. It's completely different. But if you give the player the opportunity to choose what they want for that particular piece that they're playing, now you can get an instrument that is much more guitar-like in its way, that you get a smooth, sustained sound. So that's pretty much the story.
That's great. I love that. So let's hit some of these questions here. We got a question asking, let's put it on the screen here. What brand and model is the preamp used in CR violins, and is it available for separate purchase?
That's made by EMG. And I certainly, we'd be happy enough to sell you a circuit. I don't think EMG would be particularly interested because they make it for us, but we're not in the business of selling circuits. But if somebody wants to experiment with a violin, but they would really want to get the pickup and everything, frankly, because it's integrated with that. So it has the functions for the pickup and the switch. It wouldn't be useful for but you could take that, circuit and the pickup. You could put that on any violin, but you'd want the two together, I think.
Okay, so Marek, that's the answer to that. And then the other question is, do you know if you're going to have another adjustable chin rest, the version 2? Is that going to be available soon?
It is available, I thought.
Okay.
Okay, what? So.
Okay, so there's your answer. It is available.
This person that knows something I don't know, but please check with us. Okay, so, sorry about that.
No worries. We got you back here. There was a question in difference in tone between the NXTa played in active mode as compared to the CR4. As a player, I can say, yeah, I definitely hear a difference between the NXT and the CR. And maybe Ned could talk a little bit about some of the differences in the electronics between those two.
Well, the electronics are completely different. And as far as the putting words into the difference in the sound, I think I would have a difficult time doing that. But I don't think the difference is, especially, again, you have one big difference is, in the one case you have a passive tone control, which is actually a great kind of tone control. It rolls off the treble. That's really generally what the issue is how much treble you really want to accommodate in your sound. And so the passive system is very smooth and, really quite wonderful. But if you want more tone control, you would want to have active controls where you can boost and cut both the treble and the bass. So certainly in the area of tone control, you have a huge difference there. And also because you have that sort of acoustic violin mode with the CR, you definitely have another dimension of tone right there. So the CR is more versatile. There's no question about that. But again, the source of the sound is very similar on all three instruments. So, you have electronics in the instrument, but you also have electronics in your amplifier. So, and the amplifier, of course, is a huge impact on the tone. So it's a matter of taste, I think. But I would say the sort of the flat tone is very similar. When you start, working the tone in different ways, then you have more control with the CR.
Yeah, and after this interview, I'm going to play some videos for you guys where we've got all three violins being played and all three cellos being played, and you'll be able to hear them back to back to back. So you'll be able to hear what some of the subtle differences are between the different levels. Had a question about, did you ever work with Eric Aceto on some of his earlier prototypes? We got history questions coming in here.
Well, absolutely. Eric and I go way back. And of course, he's a great violin maker and also a great player. And actually, I haven't seen Eric in quite a few years, but my son is working in Geneva, New York, which is an hour away from Ithaca, and I'm going to go visit him in a couple of weeks, and I'm definitely going to go and visit with Eric. I'm really looking forward to that. And he made some of the first NS style violins. I mean, it wasn't quite fully developed, but we worked together, and it was a great experience for me. And the question about Eric specifically, just, yeah, I mean, we go way back, and was there something in particular that I've forgotten in the question?
No, I think he was just asking if you worked with him on some of the prototypes.
Oh, absolutely. I'm very indebted to Eric, really, for all his great work.
There's a question here. Any plans for a fretted viola?
Here's the thing. And I don't understand. I've always been very excited about the electric viola, and here's my take on it. We talked earlier about how a violin, actually, because it's such a small instrument, those lowest frequencies that you have on the G string are not really reproduced. You know, it has a certain kind of sound. That's what a violin is. I mean, it's a beautiful sound. I'm not critical of the sound of an acoustic violin, God forbid, but trying to understand what it is, how it works, okay? Well, with a viola is particularly kind of fraught. I mean, violin itself is one of the hardest instruments I ever worked on, in a sense of the ergonomics, you know. Getting it up on the shoulder, and, you know, to me, it's sort of like you got to be a contortionist to play a violin, and I want to make it as easy as possible. Thinking, well, with a viola, it's really, you know, a challenge, you know, to get everything playable and have a body that's sufficiently big enough to really deal with that low C string in a positive way. But of course, acoustic violas are wonderful, but to myself, man, I could make a viola with a full bass response. Violists are going to love this. And I can make it doesn't have to have a big body. I can make it easier to play, and all these, you know, all the whole concept of how you make an electric instrument more, you know, to work in ways that an acoustic instrument can't, and, you know, take advantage of those possibilities. So the viola seemed like a wonderful opportunity, but violists have not responded in kind, to be perfectly frank. We make very few violas. Violists don't seem to be, well, they just don't seem that interested in it. One of the reasons is that you can make a 5-string violin, or you can take a 4-string violin and tune it down to C and get a very good result. So I think a lot of people are doing that, and then you get the full benefit of the smaller instrument. So maybe that's part of the reason we don't sell some. I mean, it definitely is part of the reason that there are not that many violists who are getting electric violas. But I still think it has a lot of possibilities. As far as making a fretted one, we could do that, but we don't have a lot of demand for violas, frankly.
Yeah, and so I think a lot of violists just go ahead and go to a 5-string violin, because so many violists also play the violin. And then,
right.
So the viola market's pretty small to begin with, and then you divide it up even further into 15-inch and 15.5 and 16 and 16. So you've got an already small market
a fretted viola is certainly very possible, but it does involve setting up all the tooling and everything else for that instrument. And if there's no real demand, then it's hard to justify. But
for sure,
I'm looking for when I started out in this electric violin world, I mean, things have changed so much in the last 20 years. I've told this story before. I hope none of you have heard it already, but I happen to enjoy classical music myself, and we have a local quartet here that's very good here. I live in rural Maine, but we have a very high-level quartet that happens to be based in our neighborhood, and I go see the concerts every now and then. And I was sitting in the audience during intermission, sitting next to this very nice elderly lady. Of course, the audience is all incredibly elderly, frankly. I'm getting there myself, so I can relate. But in intermission, we were chatting a little bit, and I told her that I made violins, and she was very excited. She said, "Oh, that's wonderful! You make violins?" I said, "Yeah, I make electric violins." And this dark color comes across her face, and she, she was horrified. So, but that's changed a tremendous amount, and there's so much more acceptance and interest these days. And because at the beginning, I was thinking, what am I doing? No, people don't accept this. That it's too radical, whatever. But really, it's wonderful to see electric instruments embraced, and I think going forward, we're going to see more of that. And it's very exciting, really, to be part of it.
I think it's telling too. It's such a difference between the guitar community and the violin community. When you came out with your very, very revolutionary guitar, the guitar world just jumped on it. They're like, "Oh, this is amazing."
Yeah, but of course they're used to electric guitars. I mean, so I got to give violinists credit for the fact that this is a bigger stretch, bigger jump. It's a big jump, and it's so the classical tradition is steeped in tradition, so, and I respect all that, absolutely. And, but electric instruments are my thing, so I'm always, excited to see them growing in popularity and acceptance, and to see the music that's being created with electric violins and cellos and so on is very exciting. I just think it's fantastic.
Yeah, I actually encourage people to go to thinkns.com and just go to the NS Design Artists and just scroll down. That is a who's who of people doing stuff in the electric strings world. If just go through and listen to the things that each one of those artists are doing, and you're going to go, that's a rabbit hole you go down for a month where you're just chasing down what all these cool people are doing.
And the thing is that is another exciting aspect of this world, because, if you play the electric guitar, who cares? But you play the electric violin, you're special. You're part of I mean, I'm being a little facetious when I say that, but it's something new. It's developing, and there's a community of people who are excited about it, and it's so much fun to be part of that. And it's different than an instrument like an electric guitar that every Tom, Dick, and Harry already plays anyway. This is something revolutionary and forward-looking, and a lot of fun. Absolutely.
So we got somebody who said he just wanted to say how much he loves his Radius fretless and his CR5 upright. So,
well, thank you.
Great instruments.
I'm fond of them myself. Yes.
And then we have a question. Any plans to make a 6-string violin?
Yes. I won't say more.
As a 6-string guy, I just got really excited.
Well, I'm very excited about that. I've been wanting to do it for the longest time, and they are on the production schedule. We have, again, these are tough times, and, with all aspects of supply, but we definitely will be offering 6-string violins, and both, conventional and fretted. So this is going to be, we're very excited about it.
That's awesome. Yeah, somebody says that there's a saying it takes 10 years to become an overnight success. So they're very glad that you persisted.
Thank you so much. I've become obsessed. What can I tell you? Obsessed is, this is my life. What I do, and I take. It's just means so much to me to be able to do this work and to have it to see that it's working for people and that music is being created with instruments that we make. It's a great source of pride, really. It's not about the business. It's about human, the human connection and the what. And as someone who has this much musical talent, to somehow participate in the process and to provide the tools for musicians to create this art that it means so much to so many people, I consider myself very lucky.
Well, we're lucky to have you. So, hey, thank you so much for doing this interview with us. This is
My
this has
pleasure.
been really special.
It's been great, and it's great, to have a chance to meet with you and all the folks out there, and just to talk about the things that my world is all about. And so, I of course am always learning from musicians. That's imperative for me, to be in connection with musicians and to get their feedback, to learn about the things they like, and maybe it's not quite so much fun to learn about the things they don't like, but it's more important, frankly, more important. So, but it's all part of a continuing effort to create tools that facilitate the creation of art, whatever. It kind of sounds corny, but that's the way I see it.
Well, I would also suggest everybody, if you get a chance, to go out and pick up Ned's book, the Steinberger biography. It's really fantastic. I know that he's
It's not my book, by the way.
Yeah, it's just about
Jim
him.
Riley's.
That's right.
It's Jim Riley as the author. He did a beautiful job, and it is what it is, and it is the story of my work. And if you do chance to read it, I hope you enjoy it. It is the story behind all this.
Well, it's a fascinating story. I love it. And again, thank you so much for doing this interview. The rest of y'all hang around. I'm going to play some video for you of the different levels of wave, NXT and CR, violins and cellos. I promised I'd do that, so that's coming as soon as we hang up here. But Ned, thanks so much for doing this.
Matt, thank you so much, and thanks to all of you out there in the stratosphere for listening, and let's stay in touch.
Yeah, go buy some NS Design violins.
Hey, that's not a bad idea.